With hunger gnawing at her empty stomach and her unborn child kicking beneath the cardboard sign in her trembling hands, Sarah watched the Apache elder approach and braced herself for another rejection. Instead, his weathered hand extended in compassion would not only save her life, but shatter decades of hatred between two communities and rewrite the ending to a story that began with 5 desperate words: "Please, I'll work for food." Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked asphalt where Highway 264 met the edge of the Navajo reservation. Heat waves shimmered above the pavement, blurring the boundary between reservation land and the small town of Pinewood just beyond. In this wavering mirage stood a girl, her thin frame silhouetted against the vast desert landscape stretching behind her. The cardboard sign in her hands had begun to wilt in the heat, but the message remained clear. "Please, I'll work for food." Sarah Mitchell had been standing at this intersection for 3 hours today. Yesterday it had been 4, and the day before that, 5. Her feet ached in the second-hand sneakers that were a size too small. The soles were worn thin, offering little protection from the scorching pavement. She shifted her weight, trying to find relief, one hand unconsciously moving to the swell of her belly beneath the oversized t-shirt. 7 months pregnant and 17 years old. The numbers played on repeat in her mind as cars occasionally slowed to look at her before speeding up again, disappearing into Pinewood. 7 months pregnant, 17 years old, no home. No family, no future that she could see beyond the next meal. The town had made it clear she wasn't welcome. The diner had turned her away when she'd asked about waitressing. "We don't need your kind of trouble here," the manager had said, eyes fixed on her belly. The motel wouldn't rent her a room without ID and a credit card. The convenience store owner had followed her around the aisles as if she were planning to steal rather than spend her last few dollars on a bottle of water and a protein bar. Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. The baby kicked, a reminder that she wasn't truly alone, not physically, at least. But the thought brought little comfort as the afternoon sun continued its relentless assault. A battered blue pickup truck approached from the reservation side. Slowing as it neared, Sarah straightened, summoning what little energy remained. The truck pulled onto the shoulder, dust billowing around its wheels. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with deep lines etched into his copper-colored face. His long hair, streaked with silver, was tied back in a simple ponytail. He wore faded jeans and a work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. His eyes, dark and penetrating, assessed her carefully. Sarah's throat tightened. Experience had taught her to be wary of men stopping for a lone girl, but something in his measured movements, in the quiet dignity of his bearing, kept her from backing away. "You've been here 3 days," he said. His voice was deep, accented, but clear. Not a question, but a statement of fact. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. "No one has helped you." Again, not really asking. "No, sir," she managed to reply, the words scraping her dry throat. The man looked toward Pinewood, his expression unreadable. Then he returned his gaze to her. "My name is Joseph Yazzie. I have a workshop where I make furniture. My wife Maria teaches weaving there." He paused. "We could use some help." "Nothing heavy? With your condition?" Sarah blinked, uncertain if she had heard correctly. You'd give me work?" "Yes, and food." He glanced at her sign. "As you're asking." Her legs nearly buckled with relief. "I can work hard, I promise. I'll do anything. The words tumbled out, urgent and desperate. Joseph shook his head slightly. No need for promises, just honest work. He gestured to his truck. You can come now if you want, or think about it. Sarah didn't need to think. There was nothing to consider. Stay here, baking in the sun with an empty stomach and nowhere to sleep, or accept this unexpected offer. Still, caution made her hesitate. Where is your workshop? 4 miles that way. He pointed back toward the reservation. My home is nearby. My wife will be there. The mention of his wife eased some of Sarah's fear. She nodded slowly. I'd be grateful for the chance, Mr. Yazzie. Something softened in his expression, not quite a smile, but a lessening of the gravity in his features. Joseph, he corrected gently. Sarah gathered her small backpack, all she had left in the world, and approached the truck. Joseph opened the passenger door for her, then walked around to the driver's side. As she settled into the worn seat, the cool shade of the truck's interior felt like a blessing after days under the relentless sun. Joseph started the engine but didn't immediately drive away. He looked at her, his gaze direct but not unkind. What is your name? Sarah. Sarah Mitchell. He nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. You are not Navajo or Apache. No, I'm not. She tensed, wondering if this would change things. Oh, it doesn't matter, he said, seeming to read her thoughts. Hunger feels the same in any language. With that, he put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the road, leaving the boundary between town and reservation behind. Sarah watched the sign grow smaller in the side mirror until it disappeared altogether, a relic of a desperation she hoped was now behind her. As the truck rumbled deeper into reservation land, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months, the faintest flicker of hope. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. Yes, perhaps things would be different here. They had to be. There was nowhere else to go. The truck rattled along the dusty road, kicking up clouds of red earth behind it. Sarah sat in silence, watching the landscape change as they drove deeper into the reservation. The vast emptiness of the desert was punctuated by scattered homesteads, small garden plots, and the occasional cluster of grazing sheep. Joseph didn't press her with questions, for which Sarah was grateful. The quiet between them wasn't uncomfortable but contemplative, as if he understood that her story would come in its own time. The radio played softly, some station with traditional native music that Sarah didn't recognize but found oddly soothing. Her mind drifted back to how quickly her life had unraveled. Just 8 months ago, she'd been a junior at Westfield High in Philadelphia with decent grades and vague plans for community college. Her mother worked double shifts as a hospital aide, and her stepfather drove a delivery truck. They weren't rich, but they got by in their small apartment where Sarah shared a room with her younger half-sister, Emma. Then she'd met Caleb at a friend's party. He was 19, confident, with an easy smile, and plans to become a music producer. He paid attention to her in a way no one ever had before, made her feel special, wanted. When he told her he loved her after just 3 weeks, she believed him completely. The pregnancy test came back positive 2 months later. Caleb disappeared the same day she told him, blocking her number and social media accounts. Her mother had cried, not with anger, but with a deep, exhausted disappointment that cut Sarah more deeply than rage ever could. Her stepfather had been less restrained. "I won't have another mouth to feed," he'd declared. "Either you get rid of it, or you find somewhere else to live." Sarah couldn't bring herself to get rid of it. Despite everything, the life growing inside her felt like her responsibility, her choice, perhaps the first real choice she'd ever made. So 1 week later, with $200 saved from her weekend job at the mall, she'd boarded a Greyhound bus heading west. Her plan, if it could be called that, was to find her biological father in California. They'd never met. He'd left before she was born. But she had an old address her mother had once mentioned during a rare, unguarded moment. It was a desperate hope, but the only one she had. The money had lasted until Albuquerque. A kind waitress at a truck stop had let her sleep in the break room for 3 nights and given her day-old food from the diner. From there, she'd hitchhiked west, each ride taking her further from everything familiar, but no closer to anything that felt like safety, until she reached Pinewood, Arizona, where her last ride had dropped her off. 3 days of rejection had followed, culminating in this moment, riding with a stranger into unknown territory. "We're almost there," Joseph said, breaking the silence as he turned onto a narrower road lined with cottonwood trees. Sarah nodded, suddenly nervous again. "What kind of work do you do exactly?" "I make furniture," he replied, "traditional designs, but I sell to galleries in Santa Fe and Taos. Tourists like authentic native craftsmanship." There was no bitterness in his tone, just pragmatism. "Maria, my wife, makes textiles, rugs, blankets. She teaches the younger ones too." The road curved, revealing a clearing with several structures. The largest was a low, sprawling adobe house with a metal roof. Beside it stood a workshop built of wood and stone, its wide doors open to catch the breeze. A small greenhouse nestled against the south side of the property, and beyond it, a modest barn with a corral where 2 horses grazed lazily in the afternoon heat. It wasn't what Sarah had expected, though she wasn't sure what she had expected. Perhaps something more impoverished, more stereotypical of reservation life as portrayed in the few movies she'd seen. This place, while simple, had a thoughtful orderliness to it, a sense of purpose and care. Joseph parked beside the workshop and turned to her. "My wife is inside. She will have questions." His expression remained unreadable. "Answer honestly." Maria sees through lies. Sarah swallowed hard. "I understand." They got out of the truck, and Sarah followed Joseph toward the workshop, her backpack clutched to her chest like a shield. The interior was cooler, the air scented with wood shavings and something earthy, clay perhaps, or natural dyes. Tables lined the walls, some bearing half-finished pieces of furniture, others covered with weaving looms of various sizes. A woman stood at one of these looms, her hands moving with practiced precision as she worked blue and red threads into an intricate pattern. She was perhaps a few years younger than Joseph, with the same silver-streaked dark hair, though hers hung in a thick braid down her back. At their entrance, she paused and turned. Maria Yazzi's face was gentler than her husband's, the lines around her eyes suggesting frequent smiles. But her gaze was just as penetrating as it swept over Sarah, taking in her disheveled appearance, the swell of her belly, the exhaustion written in every line of her body. "Joseph," she said, her voice warm but questioning. "This is Sarah Mitchell," he replied simply. She was standing at the highway with a sign, 3 days now. Maria's expression softened. She stepped away from her loom and approached Sarah, stopping just close enough to show concern without invading her space. "You look hungry, child," she said. The simple acknowledgement of her most basic need broke something in Sarah. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision. "Yes, Mom," she whispered, unable to summon any pretense of strength. "I am." Maria led Sarah from the workshop to the house, her movements unhurried but purposeful. Joseph remained behind, returning to a half-finished chair that awaited his attention. The transition from the workshop's cool dimness to the bright afternoon sun made Sarah blink rapidly, spots dancing before her eyes. The adobe house felt solid and welcoming as they entered through a wooden door painted turquoise. Inside, the air was surprisingly cool. Thick walls kept out the heat, and ceiling fans stirred the air gently. The main room combined kitchen and living areas with simple, handcrafted furniture that Sarah guessed was Joseph's work. Textiles, rugs, wall hangings and cushion covers added splashes of color and geometric patterns to the earthen palette. "Sit," Maria said, gesturing to a sturdy table near the kitchen area. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" Sarah sank gratefully into a chair, setting her backpack on the floor beside her. 2 days ago, the waitress at a truck stop gave me some leftovers. Maria made a soft clicking sound with her tongue, not judgment, but concern. Without further comment, she moved efficiently around the kitchen, gathering items from the refrigerator and pantry. Sarah watched through half-closed eyes, the warmth and safety of the house making her realize just how exhausted she truly was. Soon, a bowl of hearty stew appeared before her, steam rising from its surface. Beside it, Maria placed a plate with thick slices of homemade bread and a glass of cold milk. "Eat slowly," she advised. "Your stomach will need time to remember its purpose." Sarah nodded, picking up the spoon with a hand that trembled slightly. The first bite nearly made her cry again. Tender meat, beans, and vegetables in a rich broth seasoned with unfamiliar spices that somehow tasted like comfort itself. She forced herself to pause between bites, to sip the milk, to breathe. Maria sat across from her, hands folded on the table, watching with eyes that missed nothing but judged nothing. When Sarah had consumed about half the bowl, Maria spoke again. "The baby's father?" Sarah set down her spoon. "Gone, as soon as I told him." Maria nodded, as if this were a common story, which perhaps it was. "And your family?" "My stepfather gave me a choice. Get rid of the baby or get out." Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. I just couldn't." "So you chose the harder path." It wasn't a question. "Where were you heading?" "California. My real father's supposed to be there. I've never met him, but..." She trailed off, the futility of her plans suddenly stark in the telling of it. Maria's expression remained gentle, but forthright. "And if you had found him, what then?" Sarah had no answer. The fantasy had never extended that far. Just reaching him had seemed goal enough when she'd left Philadelphia. Now, sitting in a stranger's kitchen with her half-eaten stew, the naivety of her plan was painfully apparent. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "At least you speak truth," Maria said with approval. "Finish your food, then you can shower and rest. We'll talk more about work tomorrow." "Thank you," Sarah whispered, then hesitated. "But I don't understand why you're helping me." Maria's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "You asked for work, not charity. There is dignity in that." She rose and moved to the sink, rinsing dishes as she spoke. "Joseph and I, we have no children of our own. The Creator had other plans for us, but we have taught many of the young ones here. Skills, yes, but also how to live in this world that often doesn't understand our ways." She turned, drying her hands on a towel. "You are not Navajo or Apache. Your path is different, but you are young, you carry life, and you stood in the sun for 3 days rather than giving up." A small smile finally appeared. "There is strength in you, Sarah Mitchell. We can work with strength." After Sarah finished eating, Maria showed her to a small bedroom at the back of the house. It was simple but clean, with a single bed covered by a hand-woven blanket in shades of blue and purple. A window looked out over the desert landscape, framing the distant mountains. The bathroom is across the hall. There are towels in the cabinet, I'll find you some clean clothes. Maria paused at the door. Rest now. Your body carries two days and both need strength. Left alone, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, running her hands over the blanket's intricate pattern. The baby shifted within her, a rolling movement that made her smile despite everything. For the first time in months, she felt something like safety. In the quiet of this room, with a full stomach and the promise of clean clothes, Sarah allowed herself to acknowledge just how close to the edge she had come. Standing by that highway, she had been one day away from collapse, from what might have been the end of both her journey and her baby's. The realization brought fresh tears, but these were different. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of the overwhelming release that comes when the weight of constant fear begins to lift. Sarah lay down on the bed, not bothering to remove her shoes. Just a moment's rest, she thought, before that shower Maria had mentioned. Just a moment to close her eyes. She was asleep before the thought was complete. Sarah awoke disoriented, her mind struggling to place the unfamiliar ceiling above her. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting patterns on the adobe wall. For a moment, panic gripped her. Where was she? Then the events of the previous day came flooding back. The highway, Joseph's truck, Maria's kitchen, the bowl of stew that had been the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from sleeping in the same position all night. Someone had removed her shoes and covered her with a light blanket. On the small table beside the bed lay neatly folded clothes, a loose cotton dress in a soft shade of green, undergarments still with tags attached, and a pair of sandals that looked to be her size. A gentle knock at the door preceded Maria's voice. "Sarah, are you awake?" "Yes," she called back, her voice rough with sleep. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sleep so long." The door opened and Maria entered, carrying a tray with a glass of orange juice and a plate of scrambled eggs with toast. "Your body needed rest," she said simply, setting the tray on the table. "Eat, then shower. The clothes should fit. The dress will give your baby room to grow." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. "I don't know how to thank you." "Thank us by taking care of yourself and the life you carry," Maria replied. "When you're ready, come to the workshop. There are things to learn." After breakfast and a blissfully hot shower, her first in days, Sarah dressed in the new clothes. The dress was loose and comfortable, skimming over her pregnant belly without clinging. The sandals fit perfectly. She plaited her damp hair into a simple braid and regarded herself in the small bathroom mirror. The face looking back at her was still tired, still too thin. But something had changed in her eyes. The desperate fear had receded, replaced by cautious possibility. The workshop was already busy when she arrived. Joseph worked at a large table, his skilled hands carving intricate designs into the arm of a chair. Nearby, a teenage boy sanded a table leg, his movements careful and deliberate. At the far end, Maria stood with an elderly woman at one of the looms, their heads bent together in conversation. Joseph looked up as Sarah entered, acknowledging her with a slight nod. "Good, you're here." He set down his carving tools and beckoned her closer. "This is my nephew, Daniel. He is learning the craft." The boy, perhaps 15 or 16, gave her a curious glance but offered a shy smile. "Hello." "Hi," Sarah replied, suddenly self-conscious. Joseph gestured to a stool beside his workbench. "Sit. I'll show you what needs doing." For the next hour, Joseph taught Sarah how to sort and organize the various tools he used. Chisels, planes, specialized carving implements whose names she struggled to remember. He showed her how different woods required different approaches, how to recognize quality in raw materials, how to maintain the tools to keep them sharp and effective. Every piece tells a story, he explained, running his hand over the chair he was creating. Not just in the designs, but in the wood itself. This oak remembers storms and sunshine. Our work is to listen to what it wants to become. Sarah wasn't sure she understood completely, but she nodded, absorbing his quiet intensity, his reverence for his materials. There was something meditative in the way Joseph worked, something that spoke of generations of knowledge passed down through careful hands. As the morning progressed, more people came and went. 2 young women arrived to work with Maria at the looms. An older man delivered a load of wood, staying to share coffee with Joseph and Sarah with unconcealed curiosity. A middle-aged woman brought a basket of fresh vegetables from her garden, exclaiming in surprise when she saw Sarah. "Yate!" The woman greeted Joseph and Maria in Navajo, then switched to English. "Who is your visitor?" "This is Sarah," Maria replied. "She will be working with us for a while." The woman's eyes flickered to Sarah's pregnant belly, then back to her face. There were questions in her expression, but she simply nodded. "I am Lily Begay. My garden is good this year. Too much for just me." She handed the basket to Maria. "These are for you." "Thank you, Lily," Maria said. "Your generosity feeds many hearts." After Lily left, Sarah helped Maria sort the vegetables, squash, tomatoes, peppers, and herbs she didn't recognize. "Everyone seems to know each other so well," she observed. "This is a small community," Maria replied. "We have known most families for generations. There are disagreements, of course, as in any family, but we understand that we need each other to survive." "And me?" Sarah asked hesitantly. "Oh, what do they think about me being here?" Maria considered this. "They are curious. Some will be welcoming, others cautious. We have learned to be wary of outsiders. Too many have come to take, not to give." She looked directly at Sarah. "Show them you are here to work, to learn, to respect our ways. The rest will follow." By midday, Sarah's back ached and her feet had swollen in the new sandals. But she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had organized Joseph's tools meticulously, swept the workshop floor, and helped Maria prepare lunch for everyone. A simple meal of bean stew, fresh bread, and salad from Lily's vegetables. They ate outside under a ramada, a shade structure built of wooden poles and branches. The conversation flowed around Sarah in a mix of English and Navajo. She stayed quiet, observing the easy familiarity among the others, the gentle teasing, the shared stories. Daniel, Joseph's nephew, sat beside her. "First day is always the hardest," he said quietly, offering her an extra piece of bread. "It gets easier." "Thank you," she replied, grateful for the small kindness. "Have you been working with your uncle for long?" 3 years, since my father died." His matter-of-fact tone held no self-pity. "Uncle Joseph says I have the hands for it." "Maybe someday I'll be as good as him." "I'm sure you will be," Sarah said, though she had no way of knowing if this was true. Daniel smiled again, a quick flash of teeth. "You're different than I expected." "Different how?" He shrugged. "Just different." Then, apparently deciding he'd said enough, he turned his attention back to his food. After lunch, Maria showed Sarah to a small desk in the corner of the workshop. "Joseph tells me you organized his tools well. You have a careful eye. That's good." She set a ledger book on the desk. "Can you read and write clearly?" "Yes," Sarah nodded. "I was decent at school." "Good. We need help with our records. Orders, materials, accounts." Maria opened the ledger, revealing pages of handwritten entries. "Our business has grown. Joseph creates, I weave, but neither of us enjoys this part." Days melted into weeks as summer's heat intensified across the reservation. Sarah's role in the Yazzi's workshop evolved beyond mere organization. With her neat handwriting and quick mind, she transformed their haphazard bookkeeping into an orderly system. She catalogued inventory, processed orders from galleries, and even began corresponding with customers by email using the workshop's single computer. Her body changed too, her belly growing rounder as her 7th month of pregnancy gave way to her 8th. The baby was active now, kicking and rolling at all hours. These movements, once alarming, had become familiar companions. "Und strong child," Maria observed one evening, as she watched Sarah press a hand to her side where a tiny foot or elbow had just protruded. They sat on the porch, shelling peas from the garden as the sun set in a blaze of orange and crimson over the distant mesas. "Sometimes I think he's training to be a soccer player," Sarah replied with a smile. "He," Maria raised an eyebrow. "You know this," Sarah shook her head. "Just a feeling." "The doctor in Philadelphia thought it was a boy, but I was only 4 months along then," Maria nodded thoughtfully. "In our tradition, we do not prepare too much before the baby comes. It can attract bad spirits who are jealous of new life." She set down her bowl of peas. "But there are things a mother should know." Over the following days, Maria began sharing traditional knowledge about pregnancy and childbirth. She taught Sarah about herbs that eased nausea and swelling, showed her how to sit and move to ease the strain on her back, and explained the importance of certain foods for a healthy baby. "My grandmother was a midwife," Maria told her as they gathered medicinal plants from the garden. "She delivered hundreds of babies, including me. She said that a woman's body knows what to do. The mind just needs to trust and follow." Sarah absorbed these lessons eagerly. Her own mother had never spoken of pregnancy or birth except as hardships to be endured. Maria's approach, treating these experiences as natural, powerful, even sacred, offered a new perspective that resonated deeply. The workshop, meanwhile, became Sarah's sanctuary. Joseph rarely spoke at length, but his quiet approval showed in small ways. A nod when she correctly anticipated which tool he needed, an extra serving of stew at dinner, a wooden cradle that appeared in her room one day without comment. Daniel became an unexpected ally. Initially reserved, the teenager gradually opened up as they worked side by side. He taught her Navajo words, explained the meanings behind the designs Joseph carved, and occasionally shared stories of his life on the reservation, both its hardships and its joys. "You're getting good at that," he remarked one afternoon, watching as Sarah carefully applied a coat of natural oil to a finished tabletop. "Thanks to you," she replied. "You're a patient teacher." Daniel shrugged, but she caught the hint of pride in his expression. "Uncle says teaching reinforces learning. When I show you, I understand better myself." Not everyone was as welcoming as the Yazzi's and Daniel. Sarah noticed the sideways glances when she accompanied Maria to the trading post, heard the whispers that sometimes fell silent when she entered a room. Once, when collecting mail from the small reservation post office, she overheard 2 older women speaking in Navajo, their tone disapproving. She didn't need to understand the words to recognize their sentiment. "Some believe we should keep to ourselves," Maria explained when Sarah tentatively mentioned the incident. "They have seen too many promises broken, too many outsiders who came with good words but bad intentions." She folded a blanket she'd just completed, her movements precise. "Show them who you are through actions, not explanations. Time reveals truth." As her due date approached, Sarah found herself contemplating the future with equal parts hope and anxiety. The Yazzi's had made it clear she could stay as long as needed, but she remained acutely aware of her status as an outsider, a guest in their home and community. One evening, unable to sleep due to the baby's acrobatics, she ventured outside. The night was cool, the sky ablaze with stars more numerous than she'd ever seen in Philadelphia. She lowered herself carefully onto the porch steps, breathing in the sage-scented air. Couldn't sleep. Joseph's voice startled her. He emerged from the shadows at the corner of the house, a mug of tea in hand. "No," she admitted. "The baby's restless tonight." Joseph nodded and sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. The night before Daniel was born, his mother walked for hours. She said he was dancing inside her, preparing for his journey. Sarah looked at him in surprise. This was more than Joseph typically shared in a week of conversations. "Your child will be born between worlds," he continued, gazing up at the stars. "Not fully of your old life, not fully of this one. That can be a strength if you help them understand both paths." "I don't know if I understand either path myself," Sarah confessed. Joseph considered this. "Perhaps that is your journey too, then, to learn alongside your child." He sipped his tea. "Maria believes you have good instincts. She does not say such things lightly." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes at this unexpected affirmation. "I'm trying," she whispered. "And that is all any of us can do," Joseph replied. "Try, learn, try again. The circle continues." They sat in companionable silence until the baby settled and Sarah could finally return to bed, carrying Joseph's quiet wisdom with her like a talisman against the uncertainties ahead. The first contraction caught Sarah by surprise, a tightening band of pressure that wrapped around her lower back and squeezed. She was in the workshop, updating the ledger with recent sales, when the sensation made her pause mid-sentence. It wasn't painful exactly, just strange, different from the Braxton Hicks contractions she'd experienced over the past few weeks. She glanced at the calendar. 2 weeks early, probably nothing to worry about. But 20 minutes later, another contraction came, stronger this time. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. She'd read that first babies often took their time. There would be hours, maybe even a day, before things progressed. By mid-afternoon, the contractions were coming regularly, every 15 minutes. Sarah tried to continue working, but Maria noticed her discomfort. "The baby comes," she said, "not a question but a statement of fact." She placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "How long between pains?" "About 15 minutes. "But it's too early. I'm not due for another 2 weeks." Maria's expression remained serene. "Babies come when they are ready, not when we expect them. Come, we should prepare." Inside the house, Maria transformed from weaver to midwife. She moved with practiced efficiency, gathering clean towels and sheets, setting water to boil, arranging pillows on Sarah's bed to create a supportive nest. She sent Daniel with messages, one to Joseph, who had gone to deliver a commission piece to a gallery in Gallup, and others to several women in the community. "Should we call an ambulance?" Sarah asked, anxiety creeping into her voice as another contraction, stronger than before, took her breath away. Maria shook her head. "The hospital is an hour away. Your body's already working. This baby will likely arrive before any ambulance." She helped Sarah change into a loose nightgown. "Besides, we have delivered many babies here. Lily was a nurse before she retired. She will come." As if summoned by her name, Lily B. Gay arrived, carrying a medical bag and wearing an expression of calm competence. She checked Sarah's vitals, listening to the baby's heartbeat with a stethoscope. "Strong and steady," she announced. "How are you feeling, Sarah?" "Scared," she admitted. Lily smiled. "Every mother is scared the first time, but your body knows what to do. even if your mind doesn't yet. More women arrived as the afternoon waned. Nancy Tsosi, whose granddaughter Sarah had met at the trading post, brought a special tea to strengthen contractions. Emma Wilson, the postmaster's wife, arrived with soft blankets and tiny clothes sewn by the community's grandmothers, a tradition Sarah learned whenever a baby was expected. To Sarah's surprise, even the older women who had whispered about her at the post office came, bringing food for after the birth and quiet prayers in Navajo that Sarah couldn't understand but could feel in the rhythmic cadence of their voices. As evening fell, the contractions intensified. Sarah walked when she could, leaned on Maria when she needed support, and breathed through the pain as it built to seemingly impossible heights before receding like a tide. "You're doing well," Lily assured her after checking her progress. "The baby has turned properly. When the time comes to push, your body will tell you." Outside, she became aware of more activity, men gathering, a fire being built, the low thrum of drums beginning a steady beat. Daniel explained when he brought fresh water, "They're singing birth songs for strength and protection." Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes, not from pain, but from the unexpected sense of community embracing her at this most vulnerable moment. These people, who had every reason to view her as an outsider, were instead welcoming her child with their most sacred traditions. Just after midnight, Joseph returned, his truck kicking up dust as it sped into the yard. He didn't enter the birthing room. That space belonged to the women, but Sarah heard his deep voice joining the songs outside, adding his prayers to those surrounding her. The final stage came swiftly. One moment, Sarah was gripping Maria's hands through a contraction. The next, an overwhelming urge to push seized her entire body. "Now," Maria said, positioning herself at the foot of the bed, while Lily supported Sarah from behind. "But your baby is ready to meet you." What followed was a blur of sensation, pain beyond anything Sarah had imagined, primal sounds she didn't recognize as her own, the encouraging voices of the women surrounding her, the steady drums outside providing a rhythm for her efforts. "The head is coming," Maria announced. "One more push. Sarah, bring your child into the light." With a final, tremendous effort, Sarah felt her baby slide into the world. A moment of silence, then a lusty cry filled the room. "A son," Maria said, placing the squirming, wet infant on Sarah's chest, "strong and perfect." Time seemed to stop as Sarah gazed down at her baby's face, red and wrinkled, eyes squeezed shut, fists clenched, as if ready to fight the world. He was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Hello," she whispered, touching his cheek with a trembling finger. "I'm your mom," the women around her murmured appreciatively, giving mother and child this moment of first recognition while completing the practical tasks of birth, delivering the placenta, cutting the cord, cleaning and swaddling the newborn. Outside, the drums shifted to a different rhythm, a celebration now, a welcome. Sarah heard cheers and calls that she later learned were traditional announcements of a safe arrival. Her son opened his eyes, dark and unfocused, seeking her face. In that gaze, Sarah found something she'd been searching for her entire life, without knowing it, belonging. Not to a place, or even to a people, but to this moment, this connection, this love that transcended everything that had come before. Dawn broke over the reservation, painting the sky in delicate strokes of pink and gold. Sarah sat propped against pillows in her bed, her newborn son sleeping peacefully in the handcrafted cradle Joseph had made. She hadn't slept much. Every tiny sound from the baby had roused her, but exhaustion couldn't dim the wonder she felt watching his perfect little face, his chest rising and falling with each breath. Maria entered quietly, carrying a tray with herbal tea and a bowl of thin porridge seasoned with cinnamon and honey. "For strength," she explained, setting the tray on the bedside table. "The first milk will come soon. Until then, this will help." Sarah sipped the tea gratefully. It had a slightly bitter taste, followed by unexpected sweetness. "Thank you for everything." Maria's smile was warm as she checked on the sleeping infant. "He is beautiful. Have you thought of a name?" Sarah hesitated. She had considered names during her pregnancy but had never settled on one. Now, after experiencing the community's embrace during his birth, she wanted something that honored both her own heritage and the people who had welcomed them. "I was thinking of Matthew," she said finally. "It was my grandfather's name, but maybe with a Navajo or Apache middle name. Would that be appropriate?" Maria considered this. Names have power in our culture. They are not given lightly. She sat on the edge of the bed. Among our people, a child often receives a name that reflects a quality the family hopes they will embody, or something significant about their birth. Like what? The men sang the eagle song when he was born, Maria recalled. The eagle represents strength, courage, wisdom. In Navajo, Atsa means eagle. Matthew Atsa Mitchell. Sarah tried the name aloud. It felt right, a bridge between worlds, just as Joseph had described her son's future. By midday, visitors began arriving, women who had attended the birth, families from across the reservation, elders who came to offer blessings. Each brought something: handmade blankets, tiny moccasins, traditional rattles, practical items like diapers and wipes. More surprisingly, they brought stories and advice, shared without condescension between sips of coffee and bites of the fry bread Nancy Tsosi had brought in abundant supply. Sarah noticed a subtle shift in how they addressed her. No longer was she simply the girl staying with the Yazis or the outsider. Now, they called her Matthew's mother, a title that carried respect and inclusion she hadn't experienced before. Emma Wilson, cradling the newborn with practiced ease, explained, "In our way, motherhood makes you part of an unbroken circle stretching back to the beginning of our people. Your son connects you to that circle." On the third day, a ceremony was held to welcome Matthew formally. Joseph carried the infant outside for the first time, presenting him to the rising sun as the community gathered in a circle. An elder spoke words in Navajo, his weathered hands extended over the baby's head. Then each person approached, offering a small gift or a whispered prayer. Sarah, still moving slowly from the birth, watched from a chair nearby, tears streaming down her face at this unexpected outpouring of acceptance. Lily Begay sat beside her. "My grandson asked why you're crying. I told him sometimes joy is too big for the heart to hold," silently. Sarah wiped her eyes. "I never expected any of this. Where I come from, people mostly keep to themselves. They don't rally around strangers." "You are not a stranger now," Lily replied simply. "You are Matthew's mother. He was born on this land. His first breath contained our air. His first sounds echoed against our mountains. That makes him one of us, and you his family." Word of the birth spread beyond the reservation. On the fifth day, the bell at the Yazis' front door rang, an unusual occurrence. Sarah, nursing Matthew in the living room, heard unfamiliar voices. Joseph had gone to the workshop, and Maria was in the kitchen, so she carefully adjusted her clothing and went to see who had arrived. Standing in the entryway were two women from Pinewood, one middle-aged with carefully styled blonde hair, the other younger with a clipboard clutched to her chest. They looked startled to see Sarah, recognition dawning in their eyes. "You're the girl who was standing by the highway," the older woman said. "With the sign." Sarah lifted her chin slightly. "Yes, I'm Sarah Mitchell. The younger woman glanced at Matthew, then back to Sarah's face. We're from the Pinewood Community Church. We heard about your situation. Pastor Reynolds sent us to see if you needed assistance. Before Sarah could respond, Maria appeared beside her, drying her hands on a dish towel. Sarah and her son are well cared for here, she said, her tone polite but firm. But thank you for your concern. The older woman's gaze traveled from Maria to Sarah to the baby, confusion evident in her expression. I see. Well, our offer stands if you need help. She handed Sarah a pamphlet. The church has programs for young mothers, housing assistance, job training. Thank you, Sarah replied, accepting the pamphlet out of politeness, though she had no intention of leaving the reservation. I appreciate you thinking of us. After they left, Maria shook her head slightly. Interesting that they come now, after turning you away when you needed help most. Sarah looked down at her son, now sleeping peacefully against her chest. Maybe they've had a change of heart. Perhaps, Maria allowed. Or perhaps they are uncomfortable seeing you find welcome among us rather than them. She touched Matthew's downy head gently. Either way, you both have a home here for as long as you wish. That night, as Sarah settled Matthew into his cradle, she realized the pamphlet from the church women had fallen from her pocket. She picked it up, glancing briefly at its promises of salvation and support, then placed it in the bottom drawer of her dresser. The path ahead was becoming clearer, and it ran not toward Pinewood, but deeper into the community that had embraced her when she had nothing to offer but her willingness to work and her unborn child. Autumn painted the landscape in russet and gold as Matthew turned 3 months old. He had grown from the tiny, wrinkled newborn into a chubby-cheeked, alert infant who tracked movements with curious eyes and rewarded his mother with gummy smiles that made Sarah's heart swell with love. The rhythm of life with a baby had become familiar. Sarah had mastered the art of typing emails one-handed while holding Matthew with the other, or wearing him in a traditional cradle board that Maria had shown her how to use. The workshop had adapted to include a small play area where Matthew could nap or kick his legs, while Sarah worked nearby. One crisp October morning, Sarah sat at her desk reviewing the gallery sales reports with growing excitement. Joseph, Maria, look at these numbers, she called. The commission pieces for that Santa Fe gallery sold out in 2 weeks. They're asking for more and at a higher price point. Joseph looked up from the cabinet he was crafting, his expression thoughtful. We cannot make more pieces quickly. Quality takes time. I know, Sarah agreed, bouncing Matthew gently as he fussed in her arms. But what if we expanded the workshop, brought in more apprentices like Daniel? There are talented young people here who need opportunities. Maria set down her weaving shuttle. Expansion means more materials, more space, more complexity. I can handle that part, Sarah said confidently. The organizational systems are already in place, and I've been thinking about our online presence. Right now, we only sell through galleries that take a huge percentage. With a proper website, we could sell directly to customers and keep more of the profit. Joseph and Maria exchanged a glance. One of those silent communications that Sarah had learned to recognize as a discussion happening beyond words. When I found you by the highway, Joseph said finally, I offered work, not partnership. Sarah felt her face flush. I'm sorry. I overstepped. No, he continued, his voice gentle. You misunderstand. What I meant is that you have earned more than employment here. Your ideas have merit. If you wish to help build this business further, we would welcome your partnership. The offer stunned her. Partnership, but this is your family business, Maria smiled. Family is not always about blood, Sarah. You and Matthew have become part of our circle. Why should the business be different? Tears pricked Sarah's eyes as the magnitude of their offer sank in. This wasn't charity, it was recognition of her contribution, her potential, her place in their world. Thank you, she whispered. I won't let you down. Over the following weeks, Sarah threw herself into expanding the business with the same meticulous attention she'd brought to organizing the workshop. She created a detailed business plan, researched grant opportunities for native-owned businesses, and worked with a young Navajo web designer from the community college to create an online store. Word spread about the Yaz's expanding enterprise. Young people from the reservation began stopping by to inquire about apprenticeships. Lily Begay's grandson, a college student studying marketing, offered to help with social media. Even the tribal council took notice, featuring their success in the monthly newsletter as an example of sustainable economic development. The first significant bridge between the reservation and Pinewood appeared in an unexpected form. Diane Reynolds, wife of the pastor whose church had sent the women to visit Sarah. She arrived at the workshop one afternoon, hesitant but determined, clutching a newspaper clipping. I read about your business in the regional paper, she explained after introducing herself. The piece about traditional crafts finding new markets. I teach art at the high school in Pinewood, and I wondered if someone might be willing to give a demonstration for my students. Joseph, initially reserved, looked to Sarah. Since Matthew's birth, he had increasingly deferred to her judgment about interactions with the town. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity, Sarah said. I think Daniel would be perfect for it, with Joseph's guidance. He's young enough that the students will relate to him, but he's also incredibly skilled. 2 weeks later, Sarah sat in the back of Diane's classroom, Matthew sleeping in a sling across her chest, watching with pride as Daniel demonstrated traditional wood-carving techniques to a group of fascinated teenagers. Joseph stood nearby, occasionally adding context about the cultural significance of certain designs. They're so talented, Diane whispered to Sarah. Our students have never been exposed to native craftsmanship like this. They think of art as something that happens in big cities, not right here in their backyard. The reservation has incredible artisans, Sarah replied. Most people in town just never get the chance to see it. After the demonstration, several students lingered, asking questions about apprenticeships and where they could see more examples of the work. One girl, her arms covered in colorful homemade bracelets, asked if she could visit the workshop sometime. We're having an open house next month, Sarah told her. Anyone interested in traditional arts is welcome to attend. The idea for the open house had been Sarah's, a way to showcase the expanded workshop and introduce the community to their new apprentices. Originally planned just for reservation residents, she had expanded it to include the broader community after seeing the response at the high school. Not everyone approved of this outreach. Emma Wilson had frowned when Sarah mentioned inviting people from Pinewood. They've never shown interest in our ways before, she observed. Why should we open our doors to them now? Because things don't change unless someone takes the first step, Sarah replied. And it's better for it to be on our terms, in our space, where we control the narrative. The day of the open house arrived with clear skies and a crisp breeze. Sarah had spent weeks preparing, coordinating demonstrations, arranging displays of finished work, ensuring there would be traditional foods as well as more familiar refreshments for visitors from town. Matthew, dressed in tiny moccasins and a vest that Maria had made, served as an unexpected ambassador, his wide smiles disarming even the most hesitant visitors. By mid-afternoon, the workshop and surrounding yard were filled with an unprecedented mix of people: reservation families who had supported the Yazis for years, curious townspeople experiencing native craftsmanship up close for the first time, art collectors from as far away as Albuquerque, and even a reporter from the regional newspaper. Sarah moved through the crowd, answering questions, making introductions, explaining techniques, a bridge between worlds in human form. She noticed Joseph watching her from across the workshop, a rare smile softening his usually stoic expression. When their eyes met, he nodded slightly, a gesture of approval that meant more to her than any words could express. Late in the day, as the event was winding down, the mayor of Pinewood approached Sarah. A portly man with a politician's handshake, he had spent the afternoon examining the crafts with evident appreciation. "Ms. Mitchell, this is quite remarkable," he said, gesturing around the workshop. "I had no idea such quality craftsmanship was happening so close to our town. We've been trying to develop our tourism industry, but we've been missing an opportunity right under our noses." Sarah adjusted Matthew on her hip. "Do the artisans here have been creating these pieces for generations, Mayor Stevens? The opportunity was always here. It just needed to be recognized." The mayor had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Yes, well, perhaps we haven't been as attentive as we might have been, but I'd like to discuss how Pinewood and the reservation might work together going forward, some kind of cultural exchange or regular event. It could benefit everyone." Sarah glanced toward Maria, who had been quietly listening nearby. The older woman stepped forward. "We would be open to such discussions, Mayor Stevens. Perhaps you could attend our next tribal council meeting." Then all voices could be heard. The mayor agreed readily, seemingly unaware of the subtle diplomacy in Maria's suggestion, ensuring that any collaboration would involve the broader community, not just the Yazis' workshop. As the last visitors departed, Sarah stood in the doorway of the workshop, Matthew sleeping against her shoulder, watching the sunset gild the desert landscape. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment that went beyond the successful event or the growing business. Something fundamental had shifted today, a small but significant step toward understanding between communities that had existed side by side, yet worlds apart for generations. Winter yielded to spring, and spring blossomed into summer. As Matthew's first birthday approached, the transformation that had begun with a desperate girl holding a cardboard sign continued to ripple outward, touching lives on both sides of the invisible boundary between reservation and town. The Yazis' workshop had expanded, adding a dedicated gallery space where visitors could watch artisans at work before browsing finished pieces. 5 new apprentices, 3 from the reservation and 2 from Pinewood, learned traditional crafts alongside contemporary techniques. Their website now showcased both the products and the stories behind them, attracting customers who valued authenticity and cultural heritage. Sarah's role had evolved beyond partnership to leadership. While Joseph remained the master craftsman and Maria the heart of the operation, Sarah had become its voice and vision. She spoke at regional economic development conferences, navigated grant applications, and coordinated with galleries across the Southwest. Her organizational systems had created jobs, preserved traditional skills, and generated income that benefited the broader community. But bridge building came with resistance. Some elders on the reservation viewed the growing connection with Pinewood as a threat to cultural preservation. First we share our crafts, then our ceremonies, then what remains that is truly ours," one elder had challenged during a community meeting. "The whites have taken enough. Why invite them to take more?" Sarah had listened respectfully, acknowledging the painful history behind such concerns. "We're not giving away our culture," she'd replied. "We're sharing it on our terms, controlling the narrative instead of letting others define us. And in the process, we're creating economic opportunities for our young people so they don't have to leave the reservation to find work." In Pinewood, resistance took different forms. When the town council voted to include the Yazis, workshop on official tourist maps, a vocal minority protested. "They already get government handouts," one business owner complained at a public hearing. "Now they'll be taking customers from hard-working Americans in town." Sarah had attended that meeting with Matthew on her lap, listening as Diane Reynolds unexpectedly rose to her defense. "The Yazzie family and Sarah Mitchell have created something remarkable," the art teacher had said. "They're not taking anything from us, they're adding value to our entire region. My students now have opportunities they never dreamed of before." If you can't see that, you're clinging to prejudices that have no place in our community's future. These conflicts tested Sarah in ways that stretched beyond her experience. She'd never been a diplomat or an advocate before coming to the reservation, but motherhood and mentorship had changed her, forging strength and patience she hadn't known she possessed. One evening, as she bathed Matthew in preparation for bed, she confided her frustrations to Maria. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing more harm than good. The last thing I wanted was to create division." Maria, folding tiny clothes nearby, considered this. "Growth always brings growing pains. New paths aren't traveled without disturbing the ground beneath. What matters is that the path leads somewhere worth going." "And does it?" Sarah asked, lifting a giggling Matthew from the tub and wrapping him in a towel. "Is where we're heading worth the disruption?" Maria's smile was gentle but knowing. "Look at your son. He will grow up knowing both worlds, belonging to both, able to walk between them with confidence. Is that not worth some difficult conversations along the way?" As Matthew's birthday approached, what had begun as plans for a small family celebration expanded into something more significant. The date coincided with a traditional midsummer gathering on the reservation, and the tribal council suggested combining the events, a gesture that recognized Matthew's place in the community. Preparations took on momentum of their own. Women from the reservation taught Sarah traditional birthday blessings. Joseph carved a special staff marking Matthew's first year of life. Daniel and the other apprentices built a ceremonial arbor where the celebration would take place. Then, Diane Reynolds approached Sarah after a community planning meeting. The high school choir would like to perform at Matthew's birthday, if that would be welcome. They've been learning traditional songs as part of our cultural exchange program. Word spread further. The mayor called to ask if the town could provide tables and chairs. The owner of Pinewood's bakery, who had once refused to serve Sarah, offered to donate a cake. The local newspaper planned a feature story. What had begun as a child's birthday celebration was becoming something more profound, a symbol of possibility, of barriers quietly dissolving through persistent goodwill and shared purpose. The evening before the celebration, Sarah stood outside the Yazzi's home, watching the sunset. Matthew balanced on her hip. He was no longer the helpless infant she'd carried to the reservation, but an active, curious child. With Joseph's thoughtful gaze and Sarah's determined spirit, his first word had been a blend of English and Navajo, amama, a combination of mother in both languages that seemed fitting for a child of two worlds. Joseph joined them, his hand gently touching Matthew's dark curls. "He has brought many gifts beyond himself," he observed quietly. Sarah nodded, thinking of all that had changed in the year since Matthew's birth, within herself, within the community, between peoples who had viewed each other with suspicion for generations. Tomorrow, many will gather who would not have broken bread together a year ago, Joseph continued. Some still come with doubt in their hearts, but they come. That is the beginning. The beginning of what? Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Joseph's eyes held the wisdom of generations as he gazed toward the horizon where reservation and town existed in the same landscape, separate yet connected. Of remembering that beneath all differences, we share the same earth, the same sky, the same hope for our children's futures. The rest is just the path we walk to arrive at this truth. Matthew's birthday dawned clear and brilliant, the sky an endless azure canopy stretching from horizon to horizon. Sarah woke early, watching her son sleep in his crib, his small fists tucked under his chin. 1 year. It seemed impossible that 12 months had passed since she'd held him for the first time, both of them surrounded by women whose names she hadn't known, but who had become family in all the ways that mattered. "Happy birthday, little one," she whispered, stroking his cheek gently. Matthew stirred, blinking sleepily before breaking into a gummy smile that revealed his 4 tiny teeth. Her heart swelled with a love so profound it still took her breath away. The house soon bustled with activity. Maria and several other women arrived to prepare traditional foods. Joseph and Daniel set up additional shade structures near the ceremonial arbor. Cars and trucks began arriving by mid-morning, first from the reservation, then from Pinewood, creating an unprecedented mix of vehicles parked along the dirt road leading to the Yazzi's property. Sarah dressed Matthew in an outfit that symbolized his unique heritage. A small vest Maria had embroidered with traditional designs, soft leather moccasins Joseph had crafted, and beneath these, modern clothes that Sarah had chosen. Neither fully traditional nor completely contemporary, but a thoughtful blend of both worlds, just as Matthew himself would be. By noon, the gathering had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Nearly half the reservation had come, from elders who moved slowly with the aid of canes to infants just weeks old carried in traditional cradle boards. From Pinewood came families, business owners, teachers, and students, many experiencing their first traditional gathering on reservation land. The celebration began with a blessing ceremony. Sarah stood with Matthew in her arms as an elder spoke in Navajo, offering prayers for the child's continued health, wisdom, and strength. Joseph stood beside them, a steady presence representing the male guidance in Matthew's life. As the elder completed his prayer, he took a small amount of sacred cornmeal and touched it to Matthew's forehead, lips, hands, and feet, blessing the child's thoughts, words, actions, and path in life. What followed was a blend of traditions, some ancient, some newly created for this unique occasion. The high school choir performed songs in Navajo they had learned under the guidance of reservation elders. Children from both communities played games together, their laughter bridging any linguistic or cultural gaps. Tables groaned under the weight of food representing both cultures, traditional stews and fry bread, alongside the bakery's birthday cake, decorated with symbols from both worlds. In the midst of the celebration, Sarah found herself standing slightly apart, overwhelmed by the scene before her. A year ago, she had been alone, desperate, rejected by everyone in Pinewood, with nothing but her unborn child and a cardboard sign offering to work for food. Now she stood watching as two communities, long separated by history, prejudice, and misunderstanding, broke bread together, celebrating her son's life as if it were a shared blessing. Quite a view, isn't it? Sarah turned to find Diane Reynolds beside her, the art teacher's eyes crinkling with a smile. "I never imagined anything like this," Sarah admitted. "None of us did," Diane replied. "But that's the miracle of it," She nodded toward where Matthew was being passed among a group of grandmothers, receiving kisses and blessings from women of both communities. One small life changed everything. Not just his life, came another voice. Emma Wilson joined them, her initially skeptical attitude towards Sarah long transformed into respect. It was you standing at that highway. Your willingness to work, to learn, to respect our ways while sharing your own gifts. The child opened hearts, but you built the bridge, Sarah Mitchell. Before Sarah could respond, Mayor Stevens approached, adjusting his bolo tie nervously. Miss Mitchell, the town council asked me to present this officially. He handed her an envelope. It's a proclamation declaring today Community Unity Day in Pinewood, to be celebrated annually. We hope the reservation will join us in making this a tradition. Sarah accepted the envelope, touched by the gesture despite its formality. I'm sure the tribal council will appreciate the invitation, Mayor. Thank you. As the mayor moved away, Joseph appeared at Sarah's side. It is time, he said quietly. The central moment of the celebration had arrived. Joseph led Sarah and Matthew to the ceremonial arbor, where both reservation elders and town officials had gathered. A hush fell over the crowd as Joseph raised his hands for attention. Today, we celebrate not only a child's first year of life, he began, his deep voice carrying across the gathering, but also new beginnings for all of us. Matthew Atsar. Mitchell came to us through his mother's courage and our community's compassion. His life reminds us that the future need not be bound by the divisions of the past. Joseph turned to Sarah, taking a small wooden box from his pocket. In our tradition, a child's first laugh is sacred. It marks their true arrival into this world of joy and sorrow. Matthew laughed first in Maria's kitchen when Daniel made funny faces at him. A ripple of appreciative laughter moved through the crowd. And today, we honor that moment and all that has followed. He opened the box, revealing a small silver pendant shaped like an eagle in flight. This is for Matthew, to wear when he is older. It carries the hopes of two peoples who are remembering how to be neighbors, friends, and perhaps one day, true family. Sarah's vision blurred with tears as Joseph placed the pendant in her hand. Then, in a gesture that broke with tradition, but felt absolutely right, she turned and offered it first to Maria, then to Daniel, then to Lily, Emma, and other key figures from the reservation, each touching it briefly before it returned to her. Then, following her heart, she extended the same invitation to Diane, the mayor, and others from Pinewood who had become part of their extended circle. Matthew will grow up knowing he belongs to a community that stretches beyond boundaries, she said, her voice steady despite her tears. Just as all our children deserve to grow up knowing they are valued, not for where they come from or what they look like, but for who they are and what they might become. As the pendant completed its journey through many hands, Sarah finally placed it back in its box for safekeeping until Matthew was old enough to understand its significance. The symbolism of the moment, the shared blessing of an object that would one day be worn by a child of both worlds, was lost on no one. The celebration continued into the evening. As darkness fell, a bonfire was lit and stories were shared. Tales from tribal elders about the origins of their people, accounts from town residents about Pinewood's founding, and newer stories about collaborations and friendships that had formed over the past year. Later, as the gathering began to disperse and tired children were carried to cars, Sarah stood with Matthew sleeping against her shoulder, watching the intermingling of headlights and taillights as vehicles departed, some turning toward the reservation, others toward town, all having shared the same sacred space. Joseph and Maria joined her, their presence a comfort and strength she had come to rely on. I was thinking about that sign, Sarah said softly. Please, I'll work for food. It seems like another lifetime. It was courage speaking, Maria replied, adjusting the blanket around Matthew. Hunger of the body, yes, but also hunger for purpose, for belonging. And now, Joseph asked, though his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. Sarah gazed out at the receding lights, then down at her sleeping son, then back to these two people who had become her family when she had none. And now I understand that we all hunger for the same things, no matter who we are or where we come from: security, purpose, community. She touched Matthew's soft curls. A future for our children that's better than our past. The three stood in companionable silence, watching as the last visitors departed and the desert night embraced the land in star-dusted darkness. Behind them, the home they shared stood warm and welcoming. Before them stretched a future none could have imagined a year before, a future being built, one relationship, one shared meal, one celebration at a time. Sarah Mitchell had arrived with nothing but her unborn child and a willingness to work. What she had found was not just food or shelter, but a place where bridges could be built between divided worlds, where ancient wisdom and new beginnings could coexist, where a desperate plea scrawled on cardboard could transform into a legacy of connection that would outlive them all. And as if sensing his place in this unfolding story, Matthew stirred against her shoulder, sighed deeply, and settled back into dreams that knew no boundaries at all.